Quick heads up, you can find the raw files for this video on my website. Just use the link in the description to grab them for free and follow along with me. If you're just starting out, definitely check out the free training too at shutterseek.co.uk. I've put all my courses there for free. No strings attached, no credit card, nothing. It's the fastest way to nail the basics and start taking shots that are actually worth the editing time. Let's get to work. Welcome to another tutorial where we'll be editing this image, and this was our starting point. It's shaped like this because it's made from two pictures. This is a vertical panorama, and of course you'll be able to download both images and follow along with every step you see here. The composition is, as you can see, very simple. In the foreground you can see some rocks, and on the rocks I placed a few leaves and this mossy branch which points inward toward the screen. I tried to arrange them in a way that looks as natural as possible, as if they had always been there. Unfortunately, it wasn't like that originally, so I had to place them there myself. We have two waterfalls. I tried to compose the shot so that I didn't place the two waterfalls exactly in the center, which would obviously be the logical thing to do. And the reason for that is because the right side of the image wasn't as interesting as this side here. So I definitely wanted to include a little extra of it in the shot. That's why the two waterfalls aren't exactly in the center, but shifted just a little to the right. And that's precisely because this is quite a large mass here on the left side for us. And of course, I was able to compensate for this by placing the two waterfalls a bit to the right instead of exactly in the center. Also, you can see that there's a larger mass here, while over here it's empty. So there's a big mass here and another big mass here. And I just tried to balance this out by feel. Here are the 6 photos I took, from which I plan to create an HDR panorama. We will put together the panorama, but we won't need the HDR. And that's because, unfortunately, the sky was completely gray, and even though I took underexposed shots, there was simply nothing but grayness there. White veil clouds, there's not much we can do with them. Despite this, I still chose this photo. I think there were better ones taken, for example, this foreground. I think this one is more interesting than the other, but I believe we'll learn more from this photo, so we are definitely going to edit this one now. And this is a panorama shot because I definitely wanted a foreground, a dominant foreground. That's interesting. This is perhaps the better exposed version. So I definitely wanted a dominant foreground. However, for this to really work, I had to place the camera a bit higher so that this tree wouldn't intrude into the frame. And also to have a bit of extra space here, but then the trees at the top didn't really fit in anymore. So after I took a series of shots on underexposed, one about properly exposed, one well exposed, and one overexposed to make sure we captured all the data. Then I tilted the camera upwards and took another series of shots with the same settings. If you look at the earlier photos, you can see that originally there are only a few mossy stones in the foreground. I had to build this foreground myself. So first of all, the first lesson is that you need a foreground. If you just photograph the waterfalls by themselves, it can often be interesting, but believe me, everyone photographs these waterfalls the same way. So if you want to create a more unique, special photo, always look for a foreground element that you can place here, which will make your shot stand out. And the good thing is your photo will almost certainly be better if you include a foreground. This doesn't apply to every location, but in my experience, when it comes to waterfall photos like these, if you add a foreground, the picture not only becomes unique, but it's usually better as well. And if you look, I kept experimenting with different foregrounds all along. I moved the leaves around a bit here and there, trying to arrange them so that it would feel natural, so that when someone looks at it, their eyes sense that it wasn't put together by a person. And in fact, this basically serves as an extra leading line, drawing the viewer's eye inward. So I definitely think I added something with this, but just to be safe, I took shots both with and without it, because very often you can only really tell in front of the monitor which picture is actually good or not. So it's relatively hard to decide this sometimes on the small display of the camera. If you look here for the last few minutes, or actually in the first few minutes, we still had a bit of sunlight coming in from the side, and I would have been really happy if I could have captured that, but unfortunately I couldn't, because by the time I set up our foreground, the sun was gone and we never saw it again. So unfortunately we'll have to use these pictures instead. I also took a still photo from another angle this foreground is perhaps a bit more interesting. This tree, I took this one in such a way that I made sure to capture both the brightest and the darkest parts. But let's talk a bit about the settings. So if you look at the top right, you can see that I used the lowest ISO possible. That's because in order to nicely blur the water, we need a long shutter speed. And I used a 1-second exposure. I suggest that you always take test shots with shutter speeds between half a second and 2 seconds and decide which shutter speed works best for you at the given location. Because obviously it also depends on how fast the water is flowing, how far away you're shooting from, and how much water there is, so the volume of water. So there isn't a definite number I can give you, but typically it will be somewhere between half a second and 2 seconds, and is more than likely you'll be satisfied with the result if you're photographing waterfalls. The other settings, well, you can go up to f16 on a camera equipped with a full frame sensor without the image quality starting to noticeably deteriorate. I took full advantage of this because this way the settings worked out perfectly for us. So a 1-second shutter speed, proper brightness. So basically we managed to capture everything with the setup and ISO 100. So I was able to use the lowest ISO value. This won't always be the case. So if the vegetation isn't this dense, or if you're not in a forest, then it's almost certain that you'll either have to increase the F value, which is firstly limited, and secondly, your image quality will get progressively worse. The other option, of course, is to use some kind of filter. I also have an ND filter set, and if you enjoy taking photos like this, it's essential to invest in one. I'll include the link here in the course to the one I bought in case anyone is interested. All right, that's about it for the settings. I'm going to remove all the photos we won't be working with. So here we have 6 photos. Let's quickly go over why there are 6. So I tilted the camera down once. This was the setting I gave the camera to make sure the water would be captured correctly and to record pretty much all the data. However, the camera was set to take bursts of 3 shots with a 2-stop exposure bracketing. So there's a version that's 2 stops darker, just in case we need to save the sky, if there was any. Unfortunately, there isn't. It was just a big grayness, and then 2 stops brighter as well, to make sure these dark, shadowy areas are also rich in detail. And this, I always do it out of habit, but that doesn't mean you have to use it, and we won't use it now either. In fact, all the data we need is actually present in this one image. Now, the next set of 3 shots is simply that, with exactly the same settings, I tilted the camera slightly upwards and took another series so that I could combine these 2 series into a panorama image. So let's do exactly that. I'll select this lower one, and that's the one we're going to edit now. So I'll come over here to the Develop tab, and let's edit the image. Let's go through our usual routine first. So I come in here, set it to landscape, set auto, and make black 0, and also set vibrance and saturation to 0. And with that, we already have a quick edit that looks 100 times better than our starting point. If you look, this is where we started, and that's where we ended up. Fortunately, Photoshop is getting better and better at this. Okay, but we are still far from finished, so let's go through our usual routine, Details tab. Here, by default, we already have some sharpening on the image. If you hold down Option on Mac or Alt on Windows, just drag this to the right until only the areas you want to sharpen are highlighted where there are details worth sharpening. I think a value of 80 works well here. Next, make sure chromatic aberration and lens correction are enabled. And as you can see, for me, these were already turned on by default. It even recognized the lens I used. By the way, this is a 16mm lens, a prime lens, meaning it's not a zoom lens. Basically, I mainly use it for night photography because of its large aperture. And now let's go to calibration and move the bottom slider to the right. This is what brings life back into our image. I'd say that somewhere between 60 and 70 is a good value. So this is the first place where we tweak the saturation, because if you remember, we set these values to 0 earlier, and that's because I preferred to add the saturation here. Now, this green is a bit too green for me, so exceptionally, we'll also tweak green primary section a little, and I'll shift it just a bit towards the warmer side. So to the left, let's say with a value of around 15, And maybe I'll come back here just a tiny bit and also nudge the white balance towards the warmer side. Let's set it to, say, 6000. That should be about right. I'll take a look at the histogram. You can see that our pixels are nicely running into the lower right corner. Nevertheless, we can test this. So if we come over here to the tone curve sand, it's very important that these are enabled here, and we can check what might be blown out or how much we've maxed out their dynamic range. There's a minimal amount of clipping there, but we're not going to worry about it. Mainly because if we come in here, we can see there's nothing to save. So the sky really was gray, so it's fine if it gets a little blown out there, we're not concerned about it. If this bothers you, or for example, if you want to upload it to stock sites, then it's worth going over the image one more time before saving it at the end, just to make sure nothing is blown out. And if there is, then you can come in here to the tone curves and just pull it down ever so slightly, and nothing will be blown out anymore since it can't reach 100% white. So you can see that there will be an empty section here. And if we pull this down just a tiny bit, there will be a little gap and nothing can get blown out. All right, I'll leave this alone for now. So for the first step, I don't want to do anything else except bring out all the details, which I've managed to do now. So it doesn't matter if the image is a bit flat or boring. The main thing is that nothing should be too dark or too bright. And for that, this edit is more than enough. So we need to copy this over to this image, which was taken with the same settings, just tilted a bit higher, so this one is selected. I press Command, click over here to synchronize. And now, if we come over here, you can see that both images have exactly the same settings. Let's check it. Okay, the top part is a bit too bright now, so we want to recover the sky from up here. All I do is draw a single mask from the top and pull back the exposure a bit. So I don't want it to be that bright up there. And with that, we're done. And now we have nothing else to do. Both are still selected. Right click and photo merge and panorama. And here, always check all three options. It varies which one works best each time. For us now, perspective will clearly be the right choice. And here we have something called warp. If it's about nature, if you're photographing nature, then you can drag this because it's usually not a problem if the vertical lines get a bit distorted. I would basically drag this here and edit the picture like this. But just so we can learn more, I'm going to skip this now. So the simple way is that you pull this up to 100%, edit the picture, and you're done. But you won't always be able to use this. So just so we can learn more from it, I'm not going to do this now. And instead, I'll show you another technique. So I click on merge here. In the top left, you can see the status of our panorama. So here's our panorama image, and we can edit it. So we can edit it here as well. So we can stay here and edit the image here, then crop it to size at the end. And I think this is probably the best thing we can do. So let's start editing. For now, you need to ignore these empty areas here. So don't worry about them. These will be fixed later. The important thing for us is to direct attention where we want it, to what we want to show. So I come here to the masks, and I almost always start by marking the main subject of our image with a radial gradient, which in this case is the waterfalls and rocks in the center. I invert it, and everything outside of that I darken a bit. So roughly like this, you can see that these areas here are already turning completely black. So I don't want there to be no data left there at all. So I'll bring up the blacks just a tiny bit, let's say to a value of 3. Okay, so next we'll create a new mask. Again, I'll select what's most important to us, and this time I won't invert it, but I will brighten the inner part a bit. Roughly like this. Let's create a new mask. I'll select our waterfall, which I definitely want to highlight. And here as well. Here, for example, I'll only increase the whites. So the goal is to make the waterfall more dominant. Let's say at a value around 50, and I can even add to this. And here too, we'll do and with this, it's perfect. Let's create a new mask. Now, here we also have something interesting. So I definitely want to highlight this as well. So instead of increasing the exposure and brightening the whole image, I'll just raise the whites a little, which keeps the contrast while still making it a bit brighter. And maybe I'll bring up the exposure just a tiny bit as well, like this. If you look at it now, you can see that the difference is like night and day, but there's still a lot more we can do. So let's start focusing the attention more towards the center. I'm going to create some more masks here, and this time I'll choose a linear gradient, and for sure I'll bring it in from here, from this side. We can leave out this part so we don't mess with our waterfall, so just leave it as is. We'll leave that alone, and I'll darken this area, so I'm definitely starting to draw our attention inward, and I'm going to go pretty heavy here, around -1.4 or so. Next, I'll do the same thing on the other side. Roughly like this here. I don't want to mess with it, so I'll leave it as is. And we'll remove this. And here too, we'll darken it quite significantly. Here as well, something around -1.1 it should work. There are still some highlights here, so I'd like to emphasize those. For example, so I'll select this rock face here, and I'll bring up the whites all the way, maybe even brighten it a bit, or even warm it up a little. Something like this. I kind of feel like we could warm up this inner part as well. So let's find the one that was selected in the middle and warm it up just a tiny bit, but in a way that we create a new one here, rather so that the waterfalls stay white. So I don't want us to mess with those. So I'll make a new one here. In fact, we can try it out. We actually have something like this now called Select Landscape. I haven't really tried this much myself yet. Now it's thinking a bit here to see if it can find the different things in the picture. And here it says mountains. Here it says water and nature ground. Maybe this is what we need. So I'll select this create mask and I'll tweak it a bit here. And maybe I'll play not just with the temperature, but with the tint as well. -2 tint plus 6 temperature. And we're pretty much good to go. Okay, for me, this particular part is still much too bright, especially this specific area here. So this entire water section. So let's try this approach. We know that if I proceed here to select landscape, then we have water here and create mask. And we can effectively subtract from this. So from this particular area, I'll remove this lower part because we've already edited that separately. And I'll also remove the waterfall section as well as where the waterfall flows in. So I really don't want to affect it here either at all. And not here either. And everything else. So I'll darken that part a little. So I don't want that to be too dominant. Something like this. Okay. All right. And now a new mask. And down here as well, just a tiny bit separately so we can control it better. We'll darken it a little, say -0 or -1 exposure value. That should be about right. One more mask can go on, and that will be up here at the top. Once again, here on the trees, I'll bring it down just a tiny bit more, and we can warm it up a little so it doesn't have such a cool effect. And that's pretty much good. And I'd add a bit more clarity to the whole image. Something like this. If we look at our histogram, we can see there's a small gap here now. So let's go back to the tone curve and try to fill in that gap. So if I come in just a tiny bit here, you can see that as we move inward here in the top right corner, our pixels are shifting to the right. Here, it also marks in red what is being blown out. So our task is to make sure that nothing really gets blown out. However, we should make use of the full tone range. So let's come in as much as the location allows. And that's pretty much it. So we're done. You can see that we've used a ton of masks, and that's simply because we have to guide people's attention. It's extremely important when you're editing a photo, a landscape, to make sure you guide people's attention. And you can do this with leading lines, contrast, and color contrast. So we're pretty much done. So I say, let's open this image in Photoshop now and do the final steps there. Here's our image. So do you remember? I didn't distort the image to fill the entire frame, and I want to give you a tip about that now. What can you do if that's not an option, or if you simply don't want to use that option? So the second tool from the top is the selection tool, and here where the break is, right about here, I'll select this whole upper part, and in fact, I'll make a copy of it just to have it. So this is the completely edited panorama, which is now ready. And with the top layer selected, I press Command T. If you're on Windows, then it's Control T. And while continuously holding down Command and Shift, I drag this in just enough to make it straight. If I turn off the bottom layer, it's easier to see. So Command T, holding down Command and Shift continuously. And I drag this in until it's roughly straight. Something like this. And then I press Enter. We do the same thing at the other break on the opposite side. So I select this whole upper part, Command T, and by holding down Command and Shift continuously, I drag this in so that it's roughly straight, more or less like this. And of course, all that's left is to cut off the unnecessary parts. So that's pretty much it. We're done like this. I press Enter. And now, of course, the question is how much of this upper part we want to keep. So our sky was really ugly. It was totally blown out. At times like this, I think we have 2 or 3 options. One option is to try to replace the sky there a bit. Another is to play up this so-called blown out effect and add some extra lights. And the third is simply to crop it so it's not so dominant. That upper part isn't that important, but if we want to save it, let's give it a try. So let's suppose we want to save it. I would create a new layer, switch to the brush tool, set the hardness value to 0, and then carefully place it somewhere around the exact middle of the designated area. I dab it right here. Oops, sorry. But let this be white like this. And now, if I press Ctrl T here and enlarge this, I can place it anywhere I want, for example, right where the light should be coming from. And we can magically add extra lights to the image, which makes the whole thing a bit more magical. But of course, this white light doesn't look that good. So this here, lights, and then above that, a solid color. A light with a yellowish hue. We can adjust this later, so it doesn't really matter what you choose right now. And if you keep holding down Option or Alt on Windows and click between the 2 layers, what you achieve is that this color only appears where this layer is visible, which is the light we've just added here. But right now, this doesn't look natural. So it's actually a good idea to put the whole thing into a folder and name it Lights. And set the blending mode to Screen. And the last thing we need to do here is adjust the opacity. So you should set the opacity level so that it truly looks as natural and seamless as possible. So we could also do it in such a way that there are actually 2 of these particular items. Meaning we typically make two distinct versions of them. And then there is a central part, a core section, where we intentionally leave it at 100% of its original intensity, and a significantly larger one where we gradually lower the overall glow or luminescence, creating a different visual effect. Okay, that's basically how it goes. Here is the before and after. This is a bit maybe strong, but perhaps not too much. And we can actually take this even further. So we could even add a few more here if we want. I'll show an example of this too. So extra glow here as well. So let's say I create a new layer here. I like this color. So we select this color. This is the color code. Here and on this layer, with the opacity set to something very low up here, we just dab a few spots, and this will give it an extra glowing effect. Here too, we can lower the opacity if needed. Now we've brightened up the top part a bit, made it a little more radiant. There are areas here where I might not want this effect to show, so we can actually add a mask to the whole thing. And I'll switch to black. And here, I want this part to stay more contrasted. Something like this. And maybe this part could also be a bit more contrasted. Something like this. Good. And now, before and after. Good. So with this, you can definitely spice things up, make it a bit more interesting. And even after all this, we could say that I'll bring it down just a little bit. We don't really need that much of that part there. Just a tiny bit here as well. All right, roughly like this. So this light, this extra light is completely optional. I think it adds something, but I'll leave it up to everyone whether they want to use it. Okay, the next and almost final step is to make a copy of the whole thing. You can do this either by selecting everything and then right-clicking and choosing Merge Layers. But there's a keyboard shortcut for this, so with the top layer selected, you press Shift-Option-Command-E, and here we name it Sharpening. So we need to sharpen the image a bit. I go up here to Filter, Other, High Pass. This should always be set to 1. And if I zoom in, you can see that our contours are here. So it's not just a gray image. The contours we want to sharpen are clearly visible. And here, all we have to do is set it to Overlay. And the grayness disappears, but the sharpening remains. So let's take a closer look. So here's a before, after, it beautifully sharpened our image. Let's check here as well. Very nice. It's perfect too. In the meantime, I noticed I forgot something. We had a few small flaws here that need to be fixed. So let's create a new layer. I'll name this Cleanup. And on the left side, let's select the healing brush. Let's make it a bit bigger and see if we can fix it. It did a pretty good job. Looks like there's something there too, but overall we're good. And there's a spot there as well. I guess that's a water droplet or condensation on the lens. We're good like this. I don't see any other flaws on this picture. So we won't bother with the rest. Really, there's only one thing left to do, and that's saving. So I come up here to File, Export, Export As, or Save for Web. I'm choosing this one now, and make sure that Convert to sRGB and Embed Color Profile are both checked. Everything else you see here is optional. And click Export, Save, and save the image. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next tutorials as well. Be sure to download the raw files and follow along with the steps. Believe me, you'll learn much faster this way.